Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kate Lukaszewicz, the Education Programs Director at Classrooms Without Borders. As we convene today, there's a heavy heart and a sense of urgency that we address the ever-evolving dynamics in the war in Israel. Over the past few weeks and months, the region has witnessed a series of developments that have the potential to reshape the course of this long-standing and complex history. Our objective today is to provide you with an overview of the most recent events, their implications, and the international response, with a focus on promoting understanding and dialogue, as well as a set of resources designed to engage in a clear understanding of the foundations of this conflict and the geopolitics of the region. And we understand that this is a deeply sensitive and multifaceted issue, and we aim to facilitate a respectful and informative discussion. I'd like to introduce now Classrooms Without Borders scholar in residence, Avi Ben-Hur, transmitting from Jerusalem. As our scholar in residence, Avi has lectured, taught, and facilitated workshops in the US, Warsaw, Prague, Berlin, and Greece. As a guide, Avi has specialized in working with organizations focusing on political issues, interfaith programs, and Holocaust studies. Classrooms Without Borders is grateful to offer no-cost learning opportunities to our community. If you'd like to support us, you can find a donation link in the chat shortly. Your input and questions are essential to our program today, so please feel free to participate in the discussion during our Q&A session. You're welcome to place questions to Avi into the chat. With no further ado, I turn it over to Avi Ben-Hur, Classrooms Without Borders scholar in residence. Thank you, Avi.
Hi, everyone. I shouldn't assume everybody knows, but you should at this point. We haven't met now for a month. We waited because we were doing it almost on a weekly basis, and we decided to give it some time to pass. So for those who don't know, I am broadcasting to you from Jerusalem. So let me start with the not so great news, which you're probably somewhat aware of, but I'm not sure if you're aware of. So about a week ago, I would say that for about 2 days, we were having 1 to 3 soldiers being killed. And on the third day, it jumped to 3 to 5 soldiers. Then 2 days later, it went from 5 to 7. And today we had 10 soldiers killed. In fact, today, not only do we have 10 soldiers killed, but we also had a division commander, that's a full colonel, 2 battalion commanders, both lieutenant colonels, and an officer. So another officer another 2 company commanders as well, both captains. All these guys, by the way, in a crack infantry unit called Golani, and another officer from an Air Force, a special Air Force rescue unit. So they all got killed in the same place. It was a whole building complex, actually in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. So if you've been following what's going on since Israel re-engaged offensively, that was a very fancy way of saying once the negotiations about the release of hostages collapsed, Israel went on the offensive again, and we continued to work on the parts of the northern part of the Gaza Strip that we had not taken. We had taken 80% of the Gaza Strip in the first wave of fighting. And we also began to engage Khan Yunis, which is in the southern part of the Strip, which is where we believe the majority of Hamas's military and political leaders are hiding underground, and where we believe that most of the hostages are also being held. And actually, the people killed, the 10 soldiers, officers killed today, were killed in the northern strip, in one of those 2 areas that we had not taken before we started to have negotiations and the retrieval of hostages. So it just goes to say that we don't have complete quiet and control over the northern part of the strip. And as I said, a fair amount of the casualties are taking place over there. So at this point, I think we've lost 110 soldiers since we began to fight offensively. We've lost over 400 soldiers if I take into account October 7th. But I'm talking now about from the moment that we began to engage Hamas frontally outside of our borders, we've already lost about 110 soldiers and counting. It's on a regular basis, which, in as wars go in most countries, it's not a lot. In Israel, it's a fairly large number, generally speaking, in recent years, for sure. Not if we look at all of Israel's wars, but there is a high sensitivity to casualties in Israel. because we're a small population, and everybody knows somebody who was killed. Just on a personal basis, I live 2 city blocks from Mount Herzl, which is Israel's national military cemetery, and what it means is because people are getting killed, souls getting killed every day, and in principle, if a family wants it, their husband, father, brother, or son, or daughter, for that matter, can be buried in the National Military Cemetery. Let me just say it a little bit differently. Every civilian cemetery in Israel has a military plot as well. But there's a national military cemetery like you have in the States with Arlington. So you have a national one here in Jerusalem on Mount Herzl. And anybody who was killed while on duty, either in the Israel Defense Forces or in the police force or the prison guard service or in the Mossad or the Shin Bet, has the privilege to be buried in Israel's national military cemetery. I'm saying all this because the main artery outside of my home is basically jammed up almost every single day. I can't drive that way. I have to now. It's not that big a deal, but I have to, I basically need to figure out, strategize how to get out of my neighborhood and get to where I have to go, just because of the situation we're having multiple funerals. And just one more thing, this past Sunday, I teach guiding courses, and there's a very special guiding course that I teach in Jerusalem that is composed 50% of Palestinians from East Jerusalem and 50% Jews. And I happen to be teaching them how to guide Mount Herzl this past Sunday. And as we entered the cemetery, it's a vast cemetery. Those who haven't been there, it's a vast cemetery and has different parts to it. I found very quickly that there was a funeral going on, and so I had to completely change how I was going to teach. I wasn't going to take, 25 Palestinians by what would be hundreds and hundreds of soldiers from different units, plus bereaved families, and so on and so forth. I think that would be a smart idea, and I kind of veered a different direction and had to navigate that differently. But getting back to the main purpose that we're meeting today. So, as I said, we are losing more and more soldiers. To be very blunt, to date, we have not managed to either capture or kill any big fish. In other words, we have not captured or killed any of the significant military or political leadership of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. They're evidently hiding underground. We haven't gotten to them yet. By virtue of the fact that just this week, Tel Aviv suffered 2 major rocket barrages coming from the Gaza Strip, tells you that we have not succeeded yet in significantly degrading yet Hamas's offensive military capabilities. And we still have, hopefully, over 130 hostages in the Gaza Strip. I'm saying that because what's also appearing in our news every day, and I don't know if it makes your news, not every day, every 2-3 days, there's an announcement that somebody who was somebody who was held hostage is known not to be alive anymore. And in this context, by the way, this week, the Israeli army actually lost 6 or 7 soldiers in an operation to retrieve 2 bodies. We knew there were bodies of hostages. One a young 20-year-old female who was badly injured and captured, dragged out of that rave, the music festival, and evidently she died in captivity relatively quickly. She was badly injured, evidently, when she was captured. And the other was a non-commissioned officer in Golani as well, who was also he was killed fighting, and they dragged his body. So the army we actually lost people to retrieve bodies, and I'll say a bit more about that later on. But that also happened this week. But we're also hearing every other day about somebody who evidently is no longer alive. By the way, the flip side also happens. Once a week or once every 2 weeks, somebody we thought was dead, it turns up hostages. This may sound strange to you, but Israeli intelligence is working overtime, and the more Hamas operatives and terrorists that we capture, and we have been capturing tens of them per day and interrogating them, we're getting more intel, and we're getting more information. So it's enabled us to have a better sense. And the issue of the hostage is something I'm going to talk a lot about. Before that, with your permission, I'm going to put up a PowerPoint and just show you some basic, very up-to-date data as of 11 o'clock this morning. And then we're going to move from there to talking about some of the key issues that we're facing right now. So just hold on a second, please. Okay. If you can see something on the screen aside from my face, please nod your head. Okay, terrific. So I've used these before, and I'll present it. This is coming from INSS, which is an excellent think tank that is associated with Tel Aviv University. It's an apolitical, believe it or not, think tank, and it deals with security issues, national security issues, international security issues, and they're giving a daily overview and statistics of what's going on. So what you can see here, okay, Israeli casualties. Look again, it says 1,200 plus killed, but over 10,000 injured. It's an important number as well. IDF casualties, 444. That includes the 110 that I referenced earlier. Israeli hostages, 138. By the way, the number as I know it is 137, meaning that one of the people, they announced one of the people dead, but this may not have been updated, but it has asterisks to talk about the fact that this is a number that keeps changing. Internally displaced Israelis, that number is all over the place. We see anywhere from 126,000 here to 200,000. And this relates to people who have been evacuated from the northern border, most actually from the northern border, and others from the Gaza envelope. And this is a serious problem. And we still have 360,000 people doing reserve duty. Okay, so this is just as an opening shot here. Now, just take a look at what's been going on with the Gaza Strip. So again, a lot of these are estimates, but you can see how many attacks the IDF has made. 21,000. That's a lot of. By the way, those attacks include a lot of those are sorties or bombings. Rockets fired from the Gaza Strip to Israel since October 7th, over 10,000. Okay, and as I mentioned, we had 2 barrages in Tel Aviv this week, and we had people injured in several barrages that took place in the center of the country this week. Terrorists killed. It says approximately 6,000. I saw a different bunch of data yesterday that talked about 7,000. So the truth is they don't really know. For example, we don't know how many terrorists were buried under buildings that were bombed. And we're not dragging the bodies into Israel. These are estimates, but let's understand what that number means. 6,000 out of an estimated 25,000 terrorists. So that's what? That's a fifth, right? Something like that. So it's not between 20 and 25%. So that's not enough. It didn't sound good, but I think everybody understood what I meant. Gazans killed according to Hamas. Okay, and here it's obviously they're trying to say that Hamas is not being accurate. I don't think Hamas actually knows the real numbers. But I want to stop and compare these two numbers, where we're saying that the approximation is that we've killed 6,000 terrorists, and that we've also killed, to all intents and purposes, most of these 18,412 people we killed, with the exception of those that they were killed by Hamas's rockets or falling down on themselves. If you look at these numbers, what you're seeing is it's showing us that about 65% of the people killed in Gaza are non-combatants, based on these this combined Israeli stats and Gazan stats. Okay, I'm saying that to you because in previous conflicts that we've had from 2008 up until this one, the percentage of non-combatants being killed was like 40, anywhere between 30 and 40. And now we're looking at upwards of 65%. So I'm just sharing that with you. That's important to take a look at. I'm not being critical of what we're doing. I'm just making an assessment here, looking at it. And in terms of internally displaced, 1.8 million. That's out of 2.3 million. In other words, the overwhelming majority of the Gazans are not in their homes, in their original homes. And we have to say that about 1 million of that 1.8 million, their homes don't exist anymore in the northern part of the Strip. Okay, here we have the stats from the October 7th massacre. And again, this is the most up-to-date statistics. And again, I said this the last time as well, and I keep repeating it. The original assessment was 1,400. It has been moved to this number here. Today, I think the general estimate is about 1,200. We're still doing a lot of DNA testing, still searching. They're missing people. They're missing people. And again, we're trying to assess how many of the missing people are people who are hostages and how many missing people are people who were killed. Okay, but you can see here, you can see the also percentages, the proportions to males and females and so on, and kids and so on and so forth, and those who are civilians and those who are not. Okay, and here we're looking at the situation with the hostages. Okay, so you can see here that the assessment was about 252 people were taken hostage. And I'll remind you again that of those 252, something like 50, or I don't know, we don't know, are not Israeli. We had released already over 25 Thai laborers. We had Filipino, we had we know the Nepalese. There are non-Israeli, non-Jewish prisoners, and there are also Israeli Arabs. We estimate now, I think, that there are 6 Arab citizens of Israel are still being kept hostage. The 2 were released, the Bedouin, and we believe there are some Palestinians from East Jerusalem that are also being held by Hamas. And you see 114 released, but that's when we look at the 114 released. Of those, 80 some odd are Israeli. The rest are foreign nationals. It doesn't matter; these are human beings. I'm just giving you a breakdown here. And yeah, we need to deal with this story, because this is something that is central to what's going on right now. And I just want to point out something else here, and that is what's been going on with the Israeli economy. And this is just the labor, the labor, the labor economy, the labor market. I'm not even talking about the stock market and things like that. So one of the things that's important for us to keep in mind: 9.8 million people in Israel, citizens. Very young population. Those significant numbers are under the age of 18, who are not in the labor market, and those who are serving the army are not considered to be in the labor market as well. We have 360,000 people called up for reserves. These are people who are laborers. They're workers, not laborers. They're people who work, and they're not working. They're out of the economy, and this is weighing down heavily on the economy. And of course, you can take a look. It says here. Okay, 760,000 workers are unable to work. Okay, because they're displaced. Okay, or they're in they're reserve duty, and saying 46,000 workers have either been fired or put on leave. So yours truly is not in the stat. Let me explain. I also work in the tourism industry, which has collapsed completely. With the exception of, obviously, I'll say why it's obviously in a second, the hotels, which have not collapsed, because most hotels are putting up evacuated people. So the hotels are actually functioning, not in the tourism capacity, but tour guides, and so on and so forth, are clearly not working, because there's zero tourism in the country, and we're kind of falling through the cracks. So they're all, and we're not the only ones. I'm trying to put it. It's not about me. I'm just saying that there are a whole slew of economic sectors that are taking a significant hit due to this war. I should say not dissimilar to COVID. Okay, so that's also something else. And finally, here just showing you some of the stats that we have, which I think are important for us to also just to take a look at for a moment. Okay. Let's stay really with the upper right-hand corner here, which is dealing with what's happening with the captives. This is what I want to talk about. We're getting more and more information about how the captives were and are being treated. And this is kind of obvious because we've had over 110, about 110 released alive. And so we've been able to, assess just first of all, in terms of the physicians. I'm not even talking about psychological damage. I'm talking about just the physicians, 20% decrease in body weight among women and children in captivity, lice, vision impairments, scabies, this kind of stuff. What's not in the stat here, by the way, is the fact that a lot of them are suffering some kind of water poisoning or some kind of problem because of the quality of water, quality and quantity. A lot of them, some of the people who at least talked about the fact they didn't drink for the entire 50 days or 40 days. They weren't given anything to drink the entire time. A lot of dehydration. And what you don't see over here is that it's very clear, and we know that at least 10 of the released captives, female and male, were sexually assaulted. Okay. We also know there was some significant torture, physical beatings and torture, and a lot of psychological torture done to the children and to the adults. So, for example, we know that they forced some of the children to watch the films that the Hamas had filmed themselves of rape and of murder, and if they were forced to watch these things. So the reason I'm saying all this, and there's a problem of breathing, of air. The reason I'm saying this is that there is a huge amount of pressure right now. I'm going to take this down. There's a huge amount of pressure right now that is coming from the families of the hostages and also from those who've been released on the government to do anything they can to get everybody else released. And here I want to put on the table so we understand a bit more clearly what's actually transpired. Essentially, Hamas began to violate the agreement in the very, very last day of the last round of prisoner exchange, when they would not release women and children. The agreement was women and children first. And we know there are still women and children there. And they wanted to turn to dealing with the elderly men and male children, and because the overwhelming majority of the children who were released were female. Okay, still male children there, and they're elderly men, and they wanted to shift to that, and Israel blanketly refused. Okay, and this is something where there's a sense among the families of the hostages and also among a certain percentage of the Israeli population, citizens, that this was a mistake, that Israel should have kept, that should have kept, even though Hamas was monkeying around, to try to retrieve as many people as possible. In any event, there are real fears now that as time goes on, a lot of the hostages are not going to make it out alive, just due to the conditions that they're under right now. And up to 2 days ago, we heard nothing about any kind of renewal of negotiations. Even what we're hearing right now is something very, very low key, not something that's full on. We're basically kept in the dark. And more people are coming out to demonstrate, and not just on a weekly basis, but a daily basis. And it's not just the families of the hostages, but also just run-of-the-mill citizens, to try to pressure the government, just to cut some kind of deal, to get the hostages back, And here it has to be said, it's very interesting because this is a real dilemma. The families of the hostages and the people who've been released, plus a lot of other people who are not families of the hostages or people who are released, are basically saying the government, the country owes its citizens to bring them back. First of all, it failed to protect them. There was a failure here of the defense establishment. There was a failure of the government, okay? And the government has a moral and legal right to retrieve these people now, to get them back alive. Okay, this is one argument. Okay, the military establishment is making the argument that the more we fight, the more pressure is put on Hamas, and that pressure is the leverage to get them to come back and to release the women and children, to release everybody. Whether this is a correct assessment or not, there's no way of telling. But the fighting is continuing, and we have not gotten any more hostages released. And again, I cannot overstate how acute and how sensitive this issue is. And I have to remind you, we're talking about 95% of the hostages are civilians. We're talking about, we still have men in their 80s there, women in their 70s there. We still have young children. We still have a 10-month, I don't know if he's 11 months old. A 10-month, he was captured, he was an 8-month-old baby, if he's still alive, and his 4-year-old brother, and his father and his mother. You know, we have a lot of people, a lot of civilians there. We have people who are sick. They arrived sick. You know, they have a tumor. They have cancer. They have this, that, the other thing, like, you know, a normal civilian population. That happens as well, and they're not being treated. We know of people who were kidnapped, wounded. Okay, so someone from the party had his arm blown off, and he was filmed being dragged in there without his arm. You know, and actually he's American. You may have heard of him. His name is Hirsch. And so, you know, you have a situation where these people may not be alive in another 2-3 weeks. It's not clear how many people will still be alive 2-3 weeks. So this is an acute, sensitive issue. It cuts across all of Israeli society, and it's you know, it took the prime minister over a month to meet with the families of the hostages, and in fact, it took him almost 2 months to meet the majority of them, because he met select ones, but he didn't meet the majority of them until last week. And it's this is something that has got the entire country really on edge, really on edge, in a bad place. So I'm stopping here with this issue for a moment, and then I'm going to another issue, and then I'm going to open up. I'm going to start looking at your questions and answering questions. Okay. So you're probably aware of the fact that there appears to be, in the last 2 days, at least in the news feed in Israel, I think to a certain extent in the United States, tensions now between the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, and Netanyahu's government. Okay. And so, and this is due to the fact that President Biden said to a group of donors yesterday, the day before yesterday, that you know, that Netanyahu's government's it has to change to a certain extent, okay, and that you know, the U.S. is backing Israel, but they can't bomb indiscriminately. They're going to lose European countries that are supportive, and so on and so forth, and there's got to be some kind of end game. So this is not, by the way, happening in a vacuum, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has also been releasing, even before what President Biden said, was saying things like, no way will the PA, the Palestinian Authority, be allowed to be in control of the Gaza Strip after this, and that Israel's going to have to remain in the Gaza Strip for quite a long time. Okay, and Gazans are not going to be allowed. Those who have left their homes will not be allowed to return to the northern part of the strip, or we'll have to, not all of them, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it also has basically come out pretty stridently against the two-state solutions. And these are all things that the U.S. administration has been for the two-state solution for a very, very long time, including the present one. So this obviously puts the Israeli government with Benjamin Netanyahu at its head at loggerheads with the Biden administration. It has to be said that internally in Israel, all the pundits, all of them across the border, saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu has started his election campaign. In other words, he's still fantasizing that he's going to be in the driver's seat when this is all over, whenever that may be, and he is trying to. He's speaking to his to right-wing base and to his right-wing partners, and he's playing politics at this moment, which is not making a lot of Israelis happy. In polls that have been done, which I don't know what they're worth at this stage because we're not facing an election right now. In polls that we see today, Netanyahu's party would lose literally half its seats. It would drop 50%, and his coalition would basically shrink way beyond a majority, way below a majority, and actually the opposition would have an overwhelming majority, a stable majority government. But those are polls at a time we're not having elections right now. But it's very, very clear that he's lost a huge amount of altitude, including among a lot of his own voters. This is very, very clear. The last thing I will say, and this is something that probably did not make your newsfeed, but it's been big in the newsfeed here in the last 4 or 5 days, and it relates directly to the war, is that the government is trying to ram through a national budget for 2024 that's got a lot of goodies for very specific sectors, specifically the ultra-Orthodox and the settlers. And there's a lot of anger, and that was actually an understatement, that all this money is going in these directions, as opposed to, for example, dealing with the evacuated people, as opposed to dealing with rebuilding their homes, as opposed to reservists that are having deep problems right now, those who, let's say, are self-employed and are reserve duty now for 2 months and counting. So this is causing a lot of angst. But these are the bedrocks of Netanyahu's coalition. If he doesn't, from his perspective, he doesn't do this, he can maybe his coalition would collapse. Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. But that must be his underlying assumption. But it is basically making a lot of headlines and making a lot of people angry around the country, and is not making him more popular. Let's put it that way. And again, that is something that is expressed in these public opinion surveys that have been going on a weekly basis. So I'm going to stop here and check out the questions, because I'm sure that a lot of questions have come in. Maybe not a lot. A few questions have come in, and I would like to answer them. Bernard's asking, how does the IDF know about the hostages who have died? So again, in some cases, we got information from people who were released. We know that. Okay, that's number one. Number two, as I mentioned previously, every single day we're capturing tens of terrorists. Okay, and they're being interrogated, and they're giving more and more information. For example, the soldiers that were killed retrieving those 2 bodies of hostages, that was from intel that was culled from captured Hamas terrorists. Okay, unfortunately, people got killed because the area was booby-trapped, and wasn't the specific area an approach to it was. And in any event, that this is one of the ways. But it's not that I can't tell you. I'm not privy to exactly how they get it, but they're getting more and more information. It is emerging. By the way, sometimes as the army's advancing, they're finding people. What are the odds that the remaining hostages are actually still alive? I think the odds are very high. The live hostages are right now the only card that Hamas has. And it's a strong card. It's a strong card. It's the only card they have. They have a vested interest in keeping them alive, as many as possible. So yeah, I believe that many of them are still alive. But when I say I believe, who knows? I mean, some of them probably dying from our bombings, okay, and some are dying because of the conditions that they're under. But I can tell all of you that Gilad Shalit, who was in their hands for 5 years, was kept and we had bombed many times. He was kept in very good shape. They ensured it because that's an important. This is an important asset. And these are important assets, and they have a vested interest in keeping them alive. Why can't the Red Cross make progress in getting access? Look, the Red Cross has no divisions, has no army. They can demand whatever they demand, but Hamas, Islamic Jihad, will or will not allow them access, and they're not allowing them access. They have their own interest in not. Listen, if they give them access, then we'll know how many hostages are alive, and we'll have a sense if they can talk to hostages what's happened to them. Okay, and the Red Cross will be forced to tell us that. So they have their own interest in not doing it, despite the fact it was part of the agreement, despite the fact that President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu both talked about it being in the agreement, but the Red Cross doesn't really have any kind of leverage with Hamas. They have no leverage with them. By the way, there's a lot of criticism in Israel about the Red Cross. They're calling them Uber. Like, all they do is they're acting as an Uber service with their ambulances taking out the hostages, but they're not doing anything else. And I think that it's not that I'm pro Red Cross. If I try to look at this as objectively as possible, not emotionally, they have no divisions. They have no leverage. They have no way of when I say divisions, they have no force. They can't use force. They have no real leverage with terror organizations like Hamas. So it's not they can ask, they can request, they can demand, but Hamas is not letting them, not giving them access. James is asking the following question. In the United States, there's a considerable movement demanding an immediate unconditional ceasefire without conditions, even among unconditional means without conditions, without conditions, even among some Jews. Is there a similar feeling among many Israeli Jews? No, absolutely not. An unconditional ceasefire? No, 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 no. In fact, let me put things on the table very, very clearly in this context. Even if tomorrow morning we were to miraculously, it's not going to happen, miraculously succeed in liberating by force, okay, all of the hostages, we would not cease fire. We would probably change our mode of offensive activity, but we absolutely would not be ceasing fire. Look, we have to say very, very clearly and honestly that Israel has, and actually has to have, to be honest with you, three primary immediate goals, none of which has succeeded in achieving thus far. Number one, we need to degrade Hamas's offensive capabilities to the extent that they cannot do what they pulled off on October 7th, and since then with the rockets, for the foreseeable future. That hasn't happened yet, and that can only be done through force. Number two, we need to retrieve, well, I probably should have said retrieve our hostages first, but I'm speaking now as the government had first framed it, and they've reframed it. First, we have to retrieve the hostages. Okay, we need to degrade Hamas's offensive capabilities, and we need to remove them as the people ruling in the Gaza Strip. That we need to do these things because if we don't, our people cannot return to their homes. Okay, it's very nice that people in the States with a huge country, okay, that you can pull back from your borders pretty far back, and that's great, and create sterile zones within the U.S. so you can't be attacked. Israel's a tiny country of 12,000 square miles, and we've had to evacuate anywhere between 125 and 200,000 people from their homes, and they can't return to their homes because their homes are not safe. That is not acceptable in any country on earth. A country has no raison d'etre, has no reason to exist if it can't provide its citizens basic, primary basic security. And that's where we're at. And we can't do it in the south, facing Hamas right now, and we can't do it in the north, facing Hezbollah. And so we need to remove those threats. It has to be done. And an unconditional ceasefire is not unconditional. No. And by the way, a ceasefire is also, if a ceasefire, we can start having the conversation now, which is irrelevant because it's not a conversation. What if the international community guaranteed, okay, what meaning, but there'd be a multinational force that would actually shoot, not the UN, that would actually stand in the buffer and protect Israeli homes from Hamas and from Hezbollah, which would never, ever, ever happen, right? Okay, no. So the answer is no. Israelis are not in that mode of thinking, okay? If underlying in the question, or I'll put it on the table anyway, if part of that question is saying, are there Israelis who are uncomfortable or unhappy or find it wrong what's happening to the civilian population in the Gaza Strip? The answer is yes. Do most of those same people say we should stop the fighting? The answer is no. The answer is no. Okay, I know for the majority of Israelis, this is a to be or not to be moment in our history. And it's not an exaggeration. It is a to be or not to be moment in our history. No other country that would be in our situation, again, in our demographic, geographic situation, in the event that would happen, would react differently, with all due respect. No other country react differently. And I'm not being blithe or glib or trying to say to you, I don't care about the people who were killed. I'm not saying that at all. I do care. But there's a real sense for most Israelis that we're to be or not to be moment. And that's the straight answer on that. Rachel's asking, I mentioned, the INSS mentioned 10,500 rockets fired into Israel from Gaza. How many rockets have been fired into Israel from other countries? So I didn't put that info up there, but we've had several thousands of rockets shot at us by Hezbollah on a regular basis. And we've had, I don't know what the number is of missiles shot at us by the Houthis, but it's probably under 50 at this point. So I can look that information up, but I didn't put it out there. But we certainly had thousands of there are thousands of rockets that have been shot by Hezbollah, and under 100 by the Houthis for sure. Do I have information about the flooding of the tunnels? So again, I'm not privy to any kind of intel. I'm just a guy with some knowledge, but not that much knowledge. And what's interesting is the idea of Israel flooding the tunnels has been in the U.S. newsfeed, and Israel has been quoting the Wall Street Journal. In other words, the IDF has not said, and no Israeli news feed has said, has been given like notification by the Defense Officer that that's what we're doing. So that's actually coming from the United States. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but we're not admitting yet to having done it. There is inside of Israel a debate about this technique, specifically because of the environmental damage that it can cause. And this is not a poo-poo thing. We're talking about it can permanently damage the groundwater in the Gaza Strip, which is, as is, not in good shape. But it's not just that. It can also cause all kinds of environmental problems that will seep over into Israel. So yeah, and it's not entirely clear that it's even be effective, that it'll even work. And of course, there's a third thing, which is also important, and that is, are we sure that there are no hostages still being kept in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where we're theoretically right now flooding with seawater? We don't want to kill our own people. I think the tactic as a tactic is meant to, pardon my pun, flush out the terrorists, meaning to get them to come out and surrender, not drown them, but to get them out. But yes, this could potentially mean that we might be killing our own people. So we're not admitting that we're doing it at this moment. It doesn't mean we're not doing it. I'm just saying it's in your news feed and not ours. And when it's in ours, we're quoting you. Agnes is asking, Israel's winning it militarily. I'm not sure you're right about that, Agnes, but we'll get that in a second. But losing the PR war. Why does Israel not pay more attention to this? So I'll be honest with all of you. I think that Israel is always going to lose the PR war. What we could have done, and we didn't, and should have done, and should do, but it's a bit late in the game, was we should have proactively on our own, not being nudged by the United States, we should have created the humanitarian corridors on our own. We should be supplying the food and water and fuel on our own, not other countries. We should have been doing that. And we should have done that for moral reasons, but also for PR reasons, if you will. And we didn't, and we're not. And that's a mistake. It's very interesting. President Biden said to Israel when he arrived here very shortly after the atrocities, don't make the mistakes we Americans made after 9/11. Don't let rage direct your responses. And I have to say that rage is definitely directing and informing and coloring to a certain extent what Israel's policy. And rage is not a very good tool to have in your kids. And so I think that we have made mistakes in that sense. Look, you're never going to, when you have civilians being killed and they're being killed, you're going to lose your PR. And when you're a small country, everybody's going to sink you with that. I mean, if you take a good look at how many civilians were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm not accusing that. I'm just saying it didn't make that much of a dent internally in the United States and let's say internationally. Okay, and Syria, they murdered 500,000 of their own people. They gassed their own people. And you didn't see college campuses, the kids flipping out over that, and what Turkey does on a regular basis in terms of the atrocities, the Kurds there, and I can go on and on and on. Evidently, the world's cares less about the Armenians that the Azerbaijani are taken care of as well. I mean, this list is a long list of atrocities, and the Uyghurs. The bigger and stronger the country that's doing the atrocity, the less they're affected by the PR. Either they don't care, and the world doesn't care. So I'm not saying that Israel should not put up a fight. My feeling, and I'm part of that fight, but my feeling is that Israel will always lose that fight. I believe that those who want to believe that Israel's in the wrong are going to believe that from the get-go. You're not going to make a dent in that. I mean, if you take a look, let's take a look at something really, really basic. And I know I said this last time, but I have to say it. There was a huge amount of systematic and systemic rape that Hamas did and other run-of-the-mill Gazas did on October 7th. And, we're in a situation where it took women's organizations 2 months to wake up, right? Let's say you hate Israel and you don't think Israel has a right to exist, but you're against rape. So how does that work? Notice there's there's been a real, to my mind, moral collapse and moral lapse among both organizations, institutions that should know better, and they've let their own prejudice and ideology get the better of them. And I don't know what an answer is for that. I take some comfort in the fact that some universities in the States, not abroad, not in Canada, not in Western Europe or Central Europe, okay, but in the United States, some universities are paying a price for their cowardice and for their dropping the ball and for their lapse of good judgment, right? So it's everybody always accuses Israel of having bad PR, and we do have bad PR, but I'm not sure we could win a PR fight. But we could do certain things that could make it easier for people who are not against us to be supportive. And I think we make a mistake. We make a mistake in some of our policies. So that's my own personal opinion. Melanie's asking, are the captured terrorists being taken to Israeli prisons? The answer is yes. By the way, evidently Hamas is not one of the things that, if these negotiations are taking place, one of the things that came out, which who knows if it's true or not, Hamas is not, the negotiation is not about those people that were just captured now, which is interesting. We're capturing these people, we're taking them from the prison to interrogate them, to get intel. They're not gonna really constitute leverage with Hamas. Hamas is all the leverage, guys. Let's make it very, very clear. They have 95% of the people holding are civilians. They're holding elderly, they're holding children, they're holding babies. They have all the leverage. They have the leverage because we're a moral, ethical, sane Western country, and these are our values. That's who we are, and these are our sensitivities, and they know that, and they played us very well. Lucy's asked the question, what is the attitude of the general public in Israel at this point towards a two-state solution, given that President Biden and the friendly Arab states want a declaration of intention for this eventuality? Has the ongoing war changed the feeling of the liberal left? Okay, Lucy. So let me just say the following. The last major public opinion survey before this war about two-state solution was in December of 2022. Less than 40% of Palestinians and less than 40% of Israelis were for a two-state solution in December of 2022. So this is a dead letter right now in that sense, because you have to understand right now, there are several issues, let's say from an Israeli perspective. The first is the Palestinian Authority is corrupt, inept, weak, and unpopular. Who exactly is going to lead a peaceful, placid Palestinian state that's going to sit side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel? How exactly is that going to play out? No, in other words, it's totally unrealistic from an Israeli perspective. You do have Israeli voices who say it's unrealistic right now, and by the way, the Biden administration is not saying, they're not talking about it happening, there's a ceasefire on Tuesday and we have a two-state solution on Thursday. That's not what they're saying. It's very clear, the Biden administration, they're saying it very clearly to the Israelis that essentially the PA has to change, has to be rebuilt from the ground up. What we're talking about, intentions. Let me make it very, very clear. Before I throw in the war itself, the present Israeli government is completely opposed to a two-state solution. Completely opposed. Okay? Adamantly so. Without any connection to the war, without any connection to this war. And as I said, less than 40% of Israelis were for a two-state solution back in December 2022, exactly a year ago, when the last major public opinion survey took place before this war. When you throw the war into the pot, it's very clear, okay, that the Israeli polity at large is going to shift further to the right. I don't mean every Israeli is going to become right-wing. I'm saying that the polity in general is going to be shifting to the right, which is pretty natural, okay, in virtually any country facing what we've faced in the last 2 months. And shifting to the right is not really shifting closer to a two-state solution, okay? Having said that, Netanyahu cannot even give a finger of a hand for Biden to grasp vis-a-vis a two-state solution, because the moment he does that, his government collapses. So you can read into what that tells you about the present prime minister and what his, let's say, his priority, where his priorities are. By the way, generally speaking, in Israel, we don't think that even though the U.S. administration and the Israeli government are on a collision course, we don't believe the United States is going to stop its military aid at this time. or for the foreseeable future. Okay, at most, we're going to see political pressure, and political pressure is important, okay, and can have some impact, but they're not going to remove. We don't believe the United States is going to remove its military support, which has been dramatic, folks. It's been just unbelievable, unbelievable. The quantity and quality of war material that we've received in the United States is unprecedented, unbelievable. Okay, and also the umbrella, the umbrella of having two, aircraft carrier task forces here is unprecedented, is unbelievable, and it's very much appreciated. Bernard's asking, isn't the big card an additional big card that Hamas has besides the hostages, international public opinion? No. Look, let me say it again. For Israel, this is a to be, I cannot emphasize this enough. This is a to be or not to be moment. If tomorrow morning the entire world says, Israel, you have to cease fire, we're not going to do it. Because ceasefire for us means we're ending as a state. And that's not going to happen. And it's not an exaggeration. You have to understand what the national sense of lack of personal security people have right now. Okay, and where we're at. We're fighting with Gaza, with Hamas in Gaza. We have Hezbollah that has been shooting rockets and has killed thus far about 10 people. Okay, Hezbollah has killed 10 people with their rockets coming in. The Houthis are also shooting at us. Okay, and so this is not, something that this is not a joke, and this is something to take very seriously. And it's not even a question of the lifespan of the present government. It's what Israeli citizens want and need to right now. The motivation among the military is very, very high, very, very high, and among civil society. Okay, it's very, very clear what has to be done. It's just going to take quite some time. And I'll say something else in this juncture. If the government does not achieve one of those two big goals that I mentioned, either degrading Hamas' offensive capabilities to the extent they cannot do a repeat of October 7th for the foreseeable future and everything that's happened since then, okay? Or topple Hamas's control of their government and their control, the Israeli government's going to collapse. If we cease fire and that situation, if we achieve all of the hostages, the government's going to collapse, and we will have to renew a war because people will not have a sense of personal security. Okay, you cannot underestimate how much personal security people had before October 7th, and how that's been completely shattered. And it's something it's not sustainable here. Hamas is claiming that the hostages are alive, and we know from a week and a half ago, for 2 weeks ago, from hostages who have been retrieved and released, that there are other live hostages. We know that for a fact. And evidently, we're also getting intel from the people that we're capturing. I have to tell you something. We've captured. I don't know the exact number because they're not telling us exactly, but we're probably looking at least over 100 terrorists in the last 4 or 5 days. Okay, live. We're getting more and more intel. So it's not. They're hostages that are alive. Eileen's talking about U.S. media seems to be showing a lot more the Palestinian side of the story, injured Palestinians, and blaming Israel for what's going on. And do I think that Americans do anything to pressure the media to better coverage? No, I think that, look, free press is one of the building blocks of a healthy democracy. And it's important to have a free press. And, it's tough. And yes, people are dying in the Gaza Strip. Innocent people are dying there. That's a fact. That's a reality. It's not made up news. It's not fake news. And this is an ugly war. All wars are. We have no choice. We have no choice if we want to exist, if we want to live here. And it's going to continue until we succeed in achieving the goals that we've set, which are if they are achievable. But this has to happen, and it's terrible. Not a good thing. But I don't think that this is a way of impacting media. I think that the media falsifies things. The media is lying. If they think they're blatantly, patently false and incorrect, they need to be called out for sure. But beyond that, free press is a building block of democracy, and I don't think anything to do about that. Huh. Cash is asking, is there a dream solution that would satisfy both parties? No. Hamas wants to remain in power, maintain its military capacity, and to get released all of the murderers that we have, their murderers that we have in our prisons. That's a solution that's unacceptable to Israel. So no, there's no dream solution. Susan says in one of my seminars that I did before October 7th, I explained that Gaza would be unsustainable as far as having enough food and water in the next few years because of the carrying capacity. Yes, I absolutely did say that, Susan. You did remember correctly, so kudos to you. And is anybody ever considering that fact when talking about the future of Gaza? Well, absolutely. Look, one of the U.S. complaints about the Israeli government and an internal complaint of many Israelis is that this government has not been planning the day after. From day one, we have not planned the day after. Okay, and that poses huge problems also for the military. The military has to know what the political goal is behind what they're doing, what they're supposed to be achieving, and this is a problem. But yes, when you look at the Gaza Strip and you look at the fact that it doesn't have a carrying capacity, I mean the amount of natural resources, food, water, energy, compared to the growing population, or the population that exists, and it's a growing population, the natural resources cannot sustain this population alive. But there are things you can do artificially to keep them going and even theoretically, or maybe prospering or flourishing. Okay, theoretically, a lot of desalination plants have to be built. Sewage disposal, some kind of external energy that's not going to come from Israel, from Egypt, whatever. There are things you have to artificially, you have to create an international port for them to export stuff. There's a lot of things that had to be done there, but we're a little bit ahead of ourselves right now. Your points are well taken, Susan, but right now we're pretty, in my opinion, we're pretty far away from any kind of humanitarian solution in Gaza, because even if Israel winds down this part of its offensive in 2 or 3 weeks, Israel's going to continue going in militarily until we succeed in fulfilling the goals that I mentioned before. Marjorie's asking, why isn't there a hue and cry that Hamas isn't doing anything to help its civilian population? Look, the United States and many other countries designate Hamas as a terror organization. So the hue and cry coming from where? From the people who are pro-Hamas and anti-Israel? Well, they think that, that they blame it on Israel. Okay. And for people who are not necessarily pro-Hamas and perceive them as a terror organization, they have low expectations, correctly so. And those who are not in either camp, I don't have a good answer for, but Hamas clearly doesn't really care. And nobody, and Israel's the one who's taking the blame for all this. Nancy's referenced the fact that the Hamas educational system basically has been indoctrinating children from kindergarten upwards to hate Jews, hate Israelis, and to grow up to murder them. Given that, how do you prevent Hamas from reorganizing? It's a very, very good question. So there are actually two points of view out there on this issue. One is you can't kill ideas, and therefore you can kill all the Hamas people, but it would regenerate and rebirth itself, and therefore your fears are well taken. The other side of that argument says, hey, guess what? The U.S., together with a lot of allies, succeeded in dramatically harming and degrading the capacities of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You know, we all remember ISIS in 2014 and 2015, and what a nightmare that was. But today we don't even think about ISIS. I mean, yes, ISIS kind of still exists, but in very, very weakened state, in very small capacity, and the same thing with Al-Qaeda. In other words, it's not that terror organizations or Islamic terror organizations have not been defeated in the past. In the recent past, I just mentioned two of them that have been defeated. Okay, so never say never. I'm going to take one last question because we're getting past my bedtime. No, I'm going to answer two questions. Two more questions. Last two. What are the views in Israel about the anti-Semitism in the colleges in the U.S.? So, look, Israel's a small country, what I call provincial, and Israel always looks through their own prism or lens at what happens outside of Israel, from an Israeli prism. And regarding anti-Semitism, Israel has a tendency, historically, to magnify and exaggerate anti-Semitism outside the country. And we are inundated and flooded in the Israeli newsfeed about how anti-Semitism is running rampant globally and in North America and in Western Europe and even in China, by the way. Go figure. And of course on college campuses, university campuses in the United States. And we're constantly being inundated with how many percentages anti-Semitic incidents have risen in the UK and in France and the US and Canada. And I'm not poo-pooing, I'm just giving you a sense that yes, we're inundated with this information. I think that Israelis have been stunned, shocked, and dramatically dismayed, A, by the rise of anti-Semitism at large, B, at anti-Semitism that has risen in the academy, in universities, and among other institutions that are not the academy. You have Israeli institutions that have been partnered for years with sister institutions abroad. For example, women's rights. I was talking about rape before, and they're shocked at what, Israel's become a leper state, a rogue state, and it's quite shocking. That having been said, and therefore, by the way, if there were many Israelis who felt in the 9 months leading up to these atrocities and this war, due to a perceived regime coup that the Netanyahu's government was trying to change, take down democracy with his so-called judicial reform, saying if that was perceived by many Israelis, not all, okay, many Israelis, and then there was a big discussion about maybe people leaving the country if they passed that. That discourse is happening less now. There are Israelis who have left in the last 2 months, I have to tell you, but they're not huge numbers. But I know, for example, that what's this? Poland. Thousands of Israelis have moved to Poland. A friend of mine's one of the heads of the Jewish community in Poland, and she told me it's like thousands of Israelis have showed up the last 2 months. Many of them also purchasing And I know that was happening in Greece. So I don't know, and Cyprus, but it's not a huge phenomenon. I think the general sense, I'm answering this question very, very transparently. The general sense from many Israelis is if if the perceived notion in Israel is that anti-Semitism is now rearing its ugly head all over the place. And countries like Canada and the United States, they're perceived as friendly, safe havens for Jewish people. I'm talking about Israeli Jews now, okay, and Israelis are thinking they're no longer safe havens. So now that even accentuates and amplifies this to be or not to be moment. We've got our backs to the wall. Okay, I'm going to answer that last question now. Okay, what is the situation with the Palestinians in the West Bank? Yardena is asking me. Hi, Yardena. Not good. Not good. First of all, and I'm going to do this very, very briefly. So you had like 150,000 Palestinians who were working in Israel on the West Bank. And because the salaries in Israel are so much higher, every one of those people was supporting another 5 or 6. Just crunch those numbers. They've not been allowed in. And what happened now was that we had a big debate this week. The security establishment in Israel told the government, you need to start letting Palestinian workers back in from the West Bank so that their economy is not going to collapse and the Palestinian Authority doesn't collapse. Okay, let's have to do diligence in terms of security clearance, like we always do with them. Okay, it's like I read a stat today that like 14 terrorists in the last 5 years, there were 14 out of these hundreds of thousands of people that have come in. 14 people. In other words, we're doing a decent job with that. It's not that most of them, all of them. We're talking about from the West Bank. And Netanyahu was leaning towards going with the strong recommendation of the security establishment and his further right-wing partners nixed it. So he nixed it. So it's not happening. So and the Israeli government is not passing on to the Palestinian Authority the taxes that we collect for them. They're supposed to get. Okay, so they're also in dire straits there economically. Plus, Israel has been very proactive in hunting down Hamas terrorists all over the West Bank. We have killed 300 terrorists in the last 2 months. Confirmed terrorists, Hamas terrorists. Okay, in the last 2 months in the West Bank. We're doing constant operations there as well while this was going on to ferret them out. Folks, thank you for joining us. These are very difficult times. I do not come with good tidings. I don't think the times are going to get better anytime soon. I'm talking about for me. This is me. I'm raising a family here. I live here. I'm not crying to you. I'm being honest with you. Okay. We're still stuck, deeply stuck in this bad place. And I don't think we're going to get out of it in the very near future. And I think it's a crapshoot in terms of whether or not we're going to succeed in achieving our goals. I worry deeply. I really worry deeply for the hostages. I'll just share with you, like personally, initially, I was very much hedging. I was caught in the middle between the two arguments about whether we should just do everything we can to get them back first, okay, or we need to fight first. And I've personally shifted to the point where we need to get these people back because my sense is that they're dying there. They're dying there. And as time's going on, the chances of them surviving are going down. And these are human beings, and these are, they're just like you and me, and they're innocent, anything wrong, and they're suffering. And this country has a moral and I think legal responsibility to get their people back. Okay, and that's where I am right now. I'm just sharing my pain with you. Yeah, I think unfortunately, because of the political situation that we have in Israel, the war also might last longer than it should last. Okay, because it's very clear to many people that the day this war is over, the current government will be fighting for its life politically, and the chance of survival are very low. On these not so happy notes, thank you for joining us. We'll probably be doing another one in another few weeks. And stay safe and try to be as supportive as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi, as always, for your informed insights and candor. We appreciate that so many of you were able to join us for today's program. Please continue to follow our social media and to read the Customs Without Borders newsletter so that you can be abreast of the upcoming program that we'll make available after our winter reset. In the meantime, we hope that you all stay well and wish a happy Hanukkah to those of you who celebrate. Thank you. Be well, everybody. We'll see you in a few weeks.